The rain had already started falling by the time I left the cafe. Bay City was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that makes every shadow look sharper, every sound louder. The streetlights painted long streaks across the wet pavement as I tightened my jacket around me and quickened my pace toward the dorms. I should have gone straight home. I should have ignored the muffled shouting that drifted from the alleyway next to Vesper nightclub. But I didn't. Curiosity has always been my downfall. I stopped just short of the corner, heart thumping, and peeked around the wall. That's when I saw him. Cashion Vale. Everyone knew who Cashion was. You couldn't be a student at Aldridge University and not know him. The golden boy with a dangerous reputation. Top of his class, captain of the swim team, son of one of the most influential men in Bay City. People loved him, feared him, envied him. And right now he was slamming someone against the brick wall. The stranger was older, maybe mid-20s, dressed in a leather jacket. He was bleeding from his lip, but Cashion's grip on his collar didn't ease. "You think you can just show your face here again?" Cashion growled, voice low and sharp. "I just came to—" "Shut up." Cashion's fist hit the wall next to the man's head, hard enough to make me flinch. I should have left right then. I should have turned and walked away, but my legs stayed glued to the ground. There was something terrifying and magnetic about him, like watching a storm from too close. The man muttered something I couldn't hear. Cashion's jaw tightened, and then, as if sensing me, his head snapped up. His gaze locked on mine. For a second I couldn't breathe. Those pale gray eyes pinned me where I stood, sharp and unyielding like a blade. He let go of the man, who stumbled and ran down the alley, disappearing into the night. But Cashion didn't look away from me. Slowly he started walking toward me. I backed up, but he was faster. "What did you see?" His voice was calm now, which was somehow worse. "And nothing," I stammered. He stopped right in front of me, so close I could see the raindrops clinging to his dark hair, the way they slid down his sharp cheekbones. "You were watching," he said. It wasn't a question. My throat was dry. "I didn't mean to." "You saw something you shouldn't have." His hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, not hard but firm enough to keep me from bolting. "Please," I said, my voice barely audible over the rain. "I won't say anything." He studied me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he leaned closer, so close I could feel his breath warm against my skin despite the cold night air. "You'd better not," he murmured. "Because if you do, you won't like what happens next." A shiver ran through me, not entirely from fear. He let go and stepped back. "Go home, Aurelian." I froze. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer. He just gave me one last look, something between a warning and a promise, and walked away. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying what I saw, Cashion's voice echoing in my head. "You won't like what happens next." What did that mean? What had I just stumbled into? By the time the sun rose, my pillow was damp from sweat. I told myself it was over, that I'd just stay out of his way and pretend nothing happened. That plan lasted exactly one day. The next night there was a knock on my dorm room door. I opened it and froze. Cashion stood there, leaning casually against the frame, wearing a black hoodie and an expression that made my stomach knot. "Hi," he said simply, as if we were old friends. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can I come in?" "No," I said too quickly. His lips curved into a small, humorless smile. That wasn't really a question. He stepped past me into the room before I could stop him. I shut the door, heart pounding. "What do you want?" He turned to face me, hands in his pockets, looking completely at home in my tiny space. "You saw something that night," he said. "I need to know I can trust you to keep it quiet." "I already told you I wouldn't say anything," I said. "Words are cheap." His gaze swept over my room, the unmade bed, the scattered notebooks on the desk, before returning to me. "You're not going to tell anyone," he said, as if stating a fact. "And if I do?" I asked before I could stop myself. He stepped closer until there was barely a foot of space between us. "Then I'll make sure you regret it." I swallowed hard. There was no anger in his voice this time, no shouting, just a cold certainty that made my skin prickle. "I don't even know what I saw," I whispered. "Good. Keep it that way." For a moment we just stood there in silence, the air between us charged. I hated the way my chest tightened under his gaze, how it made my pulse race for reasons I didn't want to name. "Why does it matter so much to you?" I asked softly. Something flickered in his eyes, gone before I could place it. "You don't need to know that," he said finally. "You just need to keep your mouth shut." And then he left just as suddenly as he came, leaving the faint smell of rain and cologne behind him. I sank onto my bed, heart still hammering. I should have felt relieved. Instead, all I felt was the unsettling weight of a secret I hadn't agreed to keep, and the lingering image of Cashion's eyes, dark and unreadable, burned into my mind. That was the night everything changed. I didn't know it then, but Cashion Vale had just dragged me into his world, and there would be no going back. I thought maybe Cashion would disappear after that night. Maybe his warning was just that, a warning, and he'd move on with his perfect, untouchable life while I went back to being invisible. But Cashion Vale wasn't the kind of person you just ran into once. He made sure of that. The first time it happened was in the cafeteria. I was sitting with Milo, my best friend, pretending to listen to his rant about our impossible economics professor when I felt it, that sharp, magnetic awareness that prickled along my skin like static. I glanced up and nearly choked on my drink. Cashion was at the far end of the room, tray in hand, surrounded by his usual crowd of athletes and admirers. But he wasn't laughing with them, wasn't even looking at them. He was staring at me. Our eyes met for half a second before I tore mine away, pretending to be fascinated by my plate of rice. "You okay?" Milo asked, frowning. "Yeah," I said too quickly. I didn't look up again, but I could feel Cashion's gaze burning into the back of my skull the entire time. The next time it was at the library. I'd chosen a table in the quietest corner, trying to focus on my notes, when someone pulled out the chair across from me and sat down. I didn't have to look up to know who it was. "Do you mind?" I muttered, not bothering to hide the irritation in my voice. "Not at all," Cashion said smoothly, flipping open a notebook as if he had every right to be there. "This is the quiet section," I hissed. "Then be quiet," he said without looking at me. I stared at him, frustrated and bewildered. "What do you want from me?" He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "Nothing. Just making sure you remember what we talked about." I clenched my jaw. "I told you I'm not going to say anything. And I told you I'm not taking chances." He leaned back in the chair, his gray eyes studying me in that unsettling way that made it feel like he could see right through me. "You're jumpy," he said. "No kidding. You keep showing up like some kind of stalker." For a second, something like amusement flickered across his face. "You think too highly of yourself, Aurelian. I'm not following you, I just happen to be around." "That's not what it feels like," I muttered. He didn't reply, just smirked faintly and went back to whatever he was pretending to write. I tried to focus on my work, but every scratch of his pen, every small movement kept pulling my attention back to him. It was infuriating. And worse, a part of me didn't want him to leave. By the third time, I'd stopped believing it was a coincidence. It was late, too late for anyone to be hanging around the track field, but I'd gone for a run anyway, hoping the cold air would clear my head. Halfway through my second lap, I saw him standing by the fence, hands in his pockets, watching me. I slowed to a stop, breathing hard. "Seriously?" Cashion walked over to me, his steps unhurried. "You shouldn't be out here alone at night." I laughed bitterly. "You don't get to act concerned about me after threatening me." He stopped just short of where I stood, his expression unreadable. "Go home," he said quietly. "Why do you even care?" I asked, frustration bubbling up in my chest. "Why does it matter so much to you what I saw that night?" For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Because it wasn't supposed to happen. None of it." Something in his tone made me pause. It wasn't anger this time, it was something heavier, darker. I swallowed hard. "Was he someone you know?" Cashion's jaw tightened. "Drop it." "But." "Drop it, Aurelian." He turned and started to walk away. "Wait," I called. He stopped but didn't look back. "You can't just keep showing up and not explain anything," I said, my voice shaking. "If you want me to keep this secret, at least tell me why it matters." There was a long pause before he finally turned around. Under the floodlights, his face looked sharper, colder, but there was something else there too. "I was protecting someone," he said quietly. "Who?" He shook his head. "That's all you get to know." I took a step toward him before I realized what I was doing. "Cashion." "Go home," he repeated, softer this time. And just like before, he left me standing there with more questions than answers. By the end of the week, I was exhausted, not just from the constant tension of running into Cashion but from lying about it. Milo had started to notice my distraction. "You've been weird lately," he said one night as we sat on the dorm floor eating instant noodles. "Is something going on?" I hesitated. I hated lying to him. Milo had been my friend since high school, but what was I supposed to say? "Yeah, I accidentally witnessed Cashion Vale nearly kill a guy behind a nightclub and now he's haunting my every move?" "I'm fine," I said instead, forcing a smile. Milo didn't look convinced. "Fine doesn't usually look like this." "Just tired," I lied. Later that night, I sat at my desk staring at my reflection in the dark window. Cashion's words replayed in my head. I was protecting someone. Oh, from what? And why did it feel like every time he looked at me, there was something he wasn't saying? I jumped when my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number, look outside. My heart lurched. I stood and moved to the window. Cashion was standing under the streetlight, hood up, hands in his pockets, like some kind of ghost that had materialized out of the night. I opened the window. What are you doing here? I hissed. Come down, he called up. It's midnight. Then no one will see us talking, he said simply. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my jacket and slipped out of the building. When I reached him, he didn't say anything at first, just looked at me like he was trying to decide something. You're still thinking about that night? He said finally. No kidding, I shot back. You won't let me forget it. He stepped closer until I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. You can hate me all you want, he said quietly, but you're not allowed to betray me. Do you understand? Something about the way he said it, not a threat this time but almost a plea, made my chest tighten. I don't want your secret, I said. Too late, Cashion murmured. You already have it. And before I could respond, he turned and walked away into the shadows, leaving me with the cold night air and the sinking feeling that this was only the beginning. I told myself I hated him. I told myself I hated the way he kept showing up, the way his presence turned every room into a trap. But that didn't explain why I couldn't stop looking for him in the crowd. It had been 3 days since the midnight encounter. 3 days of silence, which was somehow worse than him cornering me every night. I kept glancing at my phone, wondering if I'd get another message. Wondering if I wanted one. By Friday afternoon, I'd almost convinced myself that maybe Cashion had finally decided to leave me alone. Then I walked into the library. And there he was. He was sitting at my usual table like he'd been waiting for me. A single book lay open in front of him, but I doubted he was actually reading it. I stopped in the doorway, pulse jumping. Seriously? Cashion glanced up, his expression unreadable. You're late. I blinked. What? You always come here after class. You're late today. I stared at him. You're keeping track of my schedule now? He didn't answer, just gestured at the chair across from him. I hesitated before sitting down, my heart thudding uncomfortably. What do you want, Cashion? For a long moment he just studied me, his gray eyes unreadable as ever. Then he said, I need you to trust me. I froze. That wasn't what I expected. Trust you? I repeated, incredulous. You threatened me. And you're still here, he said evenly. I opened my mouth then closed it again. He had a point, though I hated admitting it. Why do you even care what I think? I asked. You're Cashion Vale. You could make anyone keep quiet. Why me? Something flickered in his expression, softer this time. Because you saw everything, he said quietly. His voice was different, lower, rougher, like it cost him something to say it. For the first time since that night, I saw a crack in the perfect, untouchable armor he wore around himself. I don't know what possessed me to follow him after that. Maybe it was the vulnerability I saw in that single moment. Maybe it was the way my chest felt too tight, like I needed to know what else he was hiding. Either way, when he stood and said, Come with me, I went. He didn't speak as we left the library and crossed the campus, heading toward the parking lot where a sleek black car waited. This is insane, I muttered as he opened the passenger door for me. You can still walk away, he said simply. I hesitated, then slid into the seat. Cashion didn't smile, but something in his posture eased, like he'd been holding his breath and finally let it out. We drove in silence for nearly 20 minutes before he pulled up to a quiet house on the edge of the city. Whose place is this? I asked. Mine, he said, getting out. The inside of the house was nothing like I expected. Not flashy, not overly modern, just simple and lived in. Cashion dropped his keys on the counter and turned to face me. Sit, he said. I sat, because somehow with him, it always felt like there was no other option. For a moment he just stood there, hands braced against the counter, staring at the floor. I didn't mean to scare you that night, he said finally. I blinked. Is that an apology? Take it however you want. His jaw tightened and I realized this wasn't easy for him. The guy you saw me with, he said after a pause. He's not just some random stranger. He used to be close to my family. And he, Cashion stopped, his hands curling into fists. He hurt someone I care about. Badly. That's why I went after him. I stared at him, my chest tight. You were protecting them, I said softly. He nodded once. Something inside me shifted. It didn't excuse everything, the threats, the intimidation, but it made him human. Before I could stop myself, I reached out and touched his hand. Cashion's head snapped up, his eyes meeting mine in surprise. For a moment, neither of us moved. His hand was warm, tense under mine, but he didn't pull away. "You don't have to do this alone," I said quietly. His expression softened, just a fraction but enough to make my breath catch. Then he gently pulled his hand free and turned away. "You shouldn't get involved," he said, his voice rougher than before. "The more you know, the more danger you're in." "Too late," I said before I could stop myself. "I'm already involved." Cashion froze, then looked back at me, something unreadable in his expression. "You're either the bravest person I've ever met," he said slowly, "or the stupidest." "Maybe both," I said, my heart pounding. For the first time Cashion smiled, not the cold, mocking smirk I'd seen before, but a real, almost hesitant smile. And just like that, something between us shifted. I didn't realize how late it was until my phone buzzed with a text from Milo asking where I was. Cashion saw the message over my shoulder. "You should go," he said quietly. I nodded, but part of me didn't want to leave. As he drove me back to campus, neither of us spoke, but the silence between us felt different now, not hostile but charged with something I didn't dare name. When he stopped outside my dorm, I reached for the door handle, then hesitated. "Cashion?" He glanced at me. "Thanks for telling me the truth. At least part of it." His eyes softened just a little. "Don't make me regret it." I stepped out of the car, my chest tight. I should have felt lighter now that I knew what this was about. Instead, the secret felt heavier than ever, because now it wasn't just his secret. It was ours. When I reached my room, Milo was waiting. "Where have you been?" he demanded. I froze, heart hammering. "I was just out," I said quickly. "With who?" I hesitated. And then, for the first time in years, I lied to my best friend. The guilt gnawed at me long after I turned off the lights. I should have told Milo everything. But then I remembered the look on Cashion's face when he said, "You don't have to do this alone," and I knew I wouldn't betray him. Not now. Maybe not ever. The next day, as I crossed the quad, someone grabbed my arm and pulled me behind one of the stone pillars. I barely had time to react before a low voice said, "You've been spending a lot of time with Cashion Vale." It wasn't Cashion. It was someone I didn't recognize, tall, broad-shouldered, with a sharp smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You should be careful," he said, leaning in close. "People who get too close to him don't always stay safe." Before I could ask what he meant, he let go and walked away, leaving me frozen in place. My phone buzzed a moment later. "Unknown number, careful who you trust. Secrets have a way of ruining people." And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I was protecting Cashion, or walking straight into something I couldn't escape. The text haunted me all night. "Careful who you trust. Secrets have a way of ruining people." I must have read it 100 times, my stomach twisting tighter with every repetition. Who sent it? The stranger who cornered me? The man Cashion fought with that night? Someone else entirely? By morning, I knew one thing. If Cashion found out, he wouldn't just let it go. And maybe that was why I didn't tell him right away. But Cashion wasn't easy to avoid. By the end of the day, he was waiting for me outside my last class, leaning against the wall with that infuriatingly calm expression. "You look like hell," he said, falling into step beside me. "Thanks," I muttered. "You're upset." "No kidding." Cashion didn't speak again until we reached the edge of the quad, where there were fewer people around. "What happened?" he asked finally. "Nothing," I said automatically. Cashion stopped walking. "You're lying." I hesitated. "Aurelian," he said, his voice quieter now, "if something's going on, you need to tell me." "I can handle it," I said. "No," he said sharply. "You can't. Not if it has anything to do with that night." The anger in his voice made something inside me snap. "Do you even hear yourself?" I said, turning on him. "You dragged me into this, Cashion. You made me keep a secret I never asked for, and now you're telling me how I'm allowed to deal with it." His expression darkened, but he didn't look away. "Yes," he said simply. I stared at him, breathless. "You don't get it," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't just your problem anymore. It's mine too. People are watching me, threatening me." "What?" I swallowed. "Someone cornered me yesterday. Said I should be careful. Then I got a text." Cashion's entire body went still. "Show me." I hesitated, then handed him my phone. His jaw clenched as he read the message. I knew he wouldn't stay quiet. "Who?" Cashion looked at me for a long moment, and then, for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "Get in the car," he said. I didn't argue this time. We drove back to the house on the edge of the city. Cashion didn't say a word the entire way, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Inside, he paced the living room like a caged animal before finally stopping and facing me. You deserve to know everything, he said. I swallowed hard. Then tell me. Cashion dragged a hand through his hair, looking suddenly older, more tired. The man you saw me with that night, his name is Rian, he said. He used to work for my father. He was supposed to be family. Supposed to be? He betrayed us. Cashion's voice was sharp, bitter. He hurt someone I love. My younger brother Ezra. He trusted Rian and Rian. Cashion broke off, his hands curling into fists. He crossed a line I can't forgive. My chest tightened. Cashion. That night I told him to stay away from Ezra. I told him if he ever came near my family again, I'd make sure he regretted it. The silence that followed was heavy. Now I understood why Cashion had been so desperate to keep me quiet. You think he's the one sending the messages? I asked. Cashion nodded once. He's trying to scare you. Maybe scare me too. I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly weak. This is insane, I whispered. Cashion crouched in front of me, his gray eyes locked on mine. I didn't want you in this, he said quietly. But you are. And now I have to keep you safe. Something about the way he said it made my chest ache. You can't protect me from everything, I said. Watch me, he said, and there was no trace of arrogance this time, just raw, unshakable resolve. It should have ended there. It should have been enough that I finally knew the truth. But that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just care about the secret anymore. I cared about Cashion. The next day, I found him sitting alone by the bleachers after swim practice, staring at the empty pool. You look like someone stole your favorite trophy, I said, trying to sound casual. Cashion glanced up, and for once he didn't look guarded. He looked tired, almost vulnerable. I can't lose him, he said softly. Your brother? He nodded. He's the only person who sees me as just Cashion, not the veil name, not the reputation. Just me. Something in my chest twisted. Without thinking, I sat down beside him. You're not as untouchable as everyone thinks, are you? I said quietly. Cashion's lips curved into a faint, humorless smile. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my image. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the softness in his voice or the way the fading sunlight caught in his hair, but I reached out and took his hand. This time he didn't pull away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Cashion said, almost in a whisper, You're the only person I can talk to about this. And in that moment, I knew I was lost. When I got back to my room, my phone buzzed again. Another text. Unknown number. You think he told you everything? He didn't. Ask him about the night before you saw him. Ask him who started it. My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing, until another message appeared. Tell anyone I contacted you and you'll both regret it. I sank onto my bed, heart hammering. I'd made my choice. I was going to stand by Cashion. But as I read the messages again, dread settled in my chest like a weight. Because whoever was on the other end of those texts, they weren't done with us. And something told me the worst was still coming.